Hello, this is the second video of polynomial functions. So now we will put into practice a little bit of the terminology that we learned in the last video. So we will learn how to solve polynomials. Solving a polynomial is basically just finding the roots of that polynomial. And there are many ways of doing this. You can find the factors, you can just, by trial and error, you can use the quadratic formula, which we will learn later on. But today we will learn how to solve polynomials just by looking at the graph. So as you can see here, solving a polynomial is finding the roots or zeros or x-intercept of a polynomial. So we will today concentrate in finding the x-intercept of a graph just by looking at it. So let's say that we had the following polynomial, which is x squared. If we were to graph this, we would find that the graph will look something like this, which is a parabola that touches the x-axis at x is equal to 0. So by seeing the graph and seeing that it touches the x-axis at that point, we can find that the root of x squared is equal to 0. Now let's say that we had a slightly more complicated polynomial and we have x squared plus 4. So you can just like graph it and you will see that it's exactly the same thing. It's a parabola, but now it crosses the y-axis at 4. So this means that it actually never crosses the x-axis right here, because as you can see, it only increases, the y only increases, it never decreases, and its lowest point is at 4, so it will never cross the x-axis. So this means that x squared plus 4 has no roots. Now let's see another polynomial. We have x squared minus 4. So if you graph this polynomial, this function, you will find that it looks like this. It's exactly the same thing, a parabola, but it crosses the y-axis at -4. And since it increases, it eventually crosses the x-axis. And if you were to graph it, or just like by inspection, you will find that it crosses the x-axis at -2 and 2. So in this case, this is an example of a polynomial that has two different roots. In the first example, x squared, it actually technically has two roots, but it's the same root, so it's 0. And as we learned in the previous video, this is said to have a 0 to have a multiplicity of 2 in x squared. In this case, 2 and -2 both have a multiplicity of 1 in the polynomial x squared minus 4. So the roots are -2 and 2. And now our last example is this slightly more complicated polynomial. We have x to the 5th minus x squared minus 1. If we were to graph it on our 89 or 84 or whatever you might have, you will see that it crosses the x-axis only once, and that it's a little bit before 1.25 and a little bit after 1. So the root is between 1 and 1.25. So each one of these little dots is at 0.25. And so, but we see that it's closer to 1.25 than to 1. So we could estimate or approximate that x, which is the root is approximately 1.2. So by just looking at the graph, you are able to get a pretty good estimate of what the zeros or the roots of a polynomial are.